I can't really remember when I last had any hope. And I certainly can't remember when anyone else did either. Because really, since women stopped being able to have babies, what's left to hope for?
The world was stunned today by the death of Diego Ricardo, the youngest person on the planet. The youngest person on Earth was 18 years, 4 months, 20 days, 16 hours and 8 minutes old.
The ultimate mystery. Why are women infertile? Some say it's genetic experiments, pollution. Why do you think we can't make babies anymore?
Doesn't matter. It's all over in 50 years. It's too late.
Move along!
All right.
We're back!
We're back, everybody, with Season 2. Lost Futures, a Mark Fisher podcast. This is Season 2, wherein we are covering Capitalist Realism.
Yes.
Starting with Chapter 1.
It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
So, we are opening Chapter 1 with a discussion of the movie Children of Men.
Alfonso Cuarón's 2006 film, which describes a type of dystopia that Mark Fisher finds to be extremely intriguing for a number of reasons.
Right.
And these are kind of a little bit famous as far as like Mark Fisher. This is usually what people read when they first read Mark Fisher.
Yeah. This, as we mentioned in our preview blurb, this is probably one of his most well-read books, most well-known books. It's a rather short book.
But within that short book, it kind of lays out a political diagnosis of capitalist society, and particularly of the ways in which neoliberalism has taken things from you. Neoliberalism we'll explain in a little bit, but first, Children of Men. What happens in Children of Men?
Right, so Children of Men, for those of you who haven't seen Children of Men, is a dystopian film from 2006 about slightly in the future, which I think was 2 years ago, where women, for whatever reason, are all infertile, and society is breaking down as a result of this seemingly unsolvable crisis that will invariably lead to the extinction of the human species. And England, at least within the perhaps not entirely reliable framing we're given, England soldiers on as the sole stable government, and it has become a xenophobic, somewhat authoritarian state.
Yeah, it's set in 2027, so it's in near distant future. One thing to note about this first chapter is it takes heavily from Mark Fisher's K-Punk article called Coffee Bars and Internment Camps, where a large part of his analysis rests on this fact that because of this dystopian universe, they started rounding up immigrants because everyone was fleeing to England, and that in the opening scene, Clive Owen's character goes into a coffee bar, and the coffee bar is struck by a terrorist attack. And he finds it very interesting that coffee bars can coexist right next to internment camps.
Right, I think also it should be pointed out that there are literal, cages with humans on them, basically scattered throughout the scenery when you're walking through London in this movie. Seemingly there's an internment camp at every train station that they stop at. There's a ubiquitous degree of this is a totalitarian society, but in many ways, and this is one of the first things Fisher hones on to, is that in many ways, despite this being a totalitarian society, it's not an entirely unfamiliar one. Unlike, say, he names V for Vendetta, and within that you can also say 1984, both book and film. You can also say my favorite movie like this, which is Equilibrium.
What is the difference he notices that makes Children of Men the movie that is his criticism?
So, first of all, there's actually nothing directly said about the government. you can imagine that elections still occur in this society. There's not really an indication that we've actually formally suspended democracy. It just nonetheless is a horribly authoritarian government that uses a police state to, among other things, round up immigrants, round up supporters of immigrants, round up any dissent against the government. You aren't ever shown the leader. You aren't told whether there's still a prime minister or still a parliament. There very well may be.
He points out that in the book version, you get more of the government.
In the book version, the main character, I think, is actually like the nephew of the dictator.
Well, in this one too,
no, in that one, it's mentioned he had a family connection that could get him a pass, but I think in the book version, it's like way more detailed than that. But whereas, of course, 1984 has a big brother, although famously it's unclear if that person's real. Equilibrium has a leader and a decidedly non-democratic system of government without elections, as does 84, as does V for Vendetta.
Brave New World.
Brave New World as well. So right away we can actually literally imagine this as our society, if our society just made a democratic decision to make a concerted effort to round up all immigrants and strike out against dissent with a overwhelming police presence.
As he says here, for all that we know, the authoritarian measures that are everywhere in place could have been implemented within a political structure that remains notionally democratic. The war on terror has prepared us for such a development. The normalization of crisis produces a situation in which the repealing of measures brought in to deal with an emergency becomes unimaginable. And yeah, that's basically what you just said. And now he gets into the quote that was the name of the chapter and how this reminds him of a phrase that's attributed to either Frederick Jameson or Slavoj Žižek, that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
Do not ask us who said this. Do not ask us what the original phrase even was. It's impossible to find out. We
might do a full episode on
we could do a good 20 minutes just on the efforts that it takes when you actually try and Google like where this quote first appeared and from whom. But yes, for our purposes, it's either Frederick Jameson and or Slavoj Žižek, and the quote is, "It is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism."
Than it is to imagine the end of capitalism.
Yes. That slogan captures precisely what I mean by capitalist realism.
Right.
So there we go, everybody. We found out what capitalist realism is.
End of season.
We're only on page 2.
It's a good thesis, though.
Right, yes. This is how to write a thesis statement, everybody, is to meanderly discuss a movie that you saw. For a paragraph.
Yeah, he then keeps going on about Children of Men, and other interesting things he notices about the movie is that there are internment camps next to franchise coffee bars, that they coexist, and that interestingly, public space has been abandoned, given over to the uncollected garbage and stalking animals. And he notices one key scene when Clive Owens and the woman who's pregnant and her wet nurse go into a school and they get startled and they think that it's the police and they think that it's like something that's going to kill them, and it's a deer running through the elementary school. And the elementary school's been abandoned because there hasn't been a kid that's been born in the last 18 years.
Yeah, and this is, I think, another key element of Fisher's thought, generally, capitalist realism specifically, and why this movie specifically, is the very poignant, and if you listen to our last season, this should make sense, the very poignantness to this movie being about a canceled future. To the fact that, as it said in the intro when we played the trailer, in 50 years this will all be over. And how that generally plays into what Fisher's ideas about late capitalism, neoliberalism are, and I think, we can, I'll offer a little bit of a preliminary definition of neoliberalism as a movement of concerted deregulation and removal of money from public spaces over a historic time period from the late 70s through now.
Yeah.
That occurred in much of the industrialized West. It especially was prevalent in the Anglosphere in the United States and England, or UK. But for now, I think that's a perfectly good working definition without getting into
what would be
theory.
some examples of people that exhibit neoliberalism for an American or British audience?
I don't know. I mean, we contracted Sesame Street out to HBO to. Yeah, I mean, we in the 60s or 70s, we created this thing called Sesame Street that was literally paid for by the government, shot in studios owned by the government, by directors who were paid by the government to do a public service of providing a free educational television show for children free of charge and free of commercials. And under the Obama administration, this might be a bit of a frivolous example, but the government entered into a contract with HBO wherein HBO gets to air Sesame Street. It gets to air new episodes before they air on PBS. And so we've semi-privatized even Sesame Street. But I mean, I think there's plenty to be said about the removal of money from social housing in both the US and England, UK, from healthcare and the like.